Such has been the day so far. Beautiful day. Thankful for your presence. Thankful for those who have joined us via Facebook or YouTube later on. We are thankful for your participation in this class. We ask if you have any questions, if you would, get a hold of us. Allow us to answer your questions. We're going to be in Matthew chapter 15. We're going to be picking up in verse number 29. And we're going to see if we can't finish this chapter out today. Maybe even get a little further. I promise that sometimes, or even attempt it. We're not always successful. But we always have a good class, and I appreciate everyone's participation and your comments. This is our Bible class. It's not my Bible class. And so your comments are coveted and appreciated. In verse 29, we pick up on the heels of Jesus healing this Gentile woman's daughter. And through her persistence and through her logical response to Jesus, he makes this great statement, "Great is your faith." And in verse 29, Jesus departs from thence. He come nigh unto the Sea of Galilee, and he went up into a mountain and sat down there. Now, in Mark 7, in Mark's account, he tells us that this is the eastern side. And so Jesus has gone plumb to the other side of the Sea of Galilee. He was on the western side. Now he's on the eastern side. And Mark's account tells us that he has gone through Decapolis. And the area of Decapolis is 10 cities. Deca means 10. And so this is a region in which Jesus has been before. Jesus had been in this area when he healed the demoniacs. Matthew records 1 and Mark records 2, or the other way around. Either way, there were actually 2 demoniacs that were healed in this region. Jesus sends the spirits into a herd of swine. The people don't appreciate that. They say, "Get out of here, don't ever come back." Well, Jesus is back in this region, and it says in verse 30, "Great multitudes came unto him, having with them those that were lame, blind, dumb, maimed, and many others, and cast them down at Jesus' feet, and he healed them." Now, what is interesting is that Jesus comes back to this area, goes up into this mountain, much like he does, and he sits down. Now, what is that indicative of? Jesus sits down on the mountain.
He's ready to teach.
Jesus is ready to teach. Jesus is ready for the people to come up so he can impart unto them the word of God that they need to hear. He's going to teach them, and he is ready for them. And what happens? The great multitudes come unto him, and they bring those that have all kinds of infirmities, all kinds of problems. And why do you think that in this region where Jesus was forbidden to come again, why do you think the people are so ready to get to Jesus?
They really need him.
They really need him, and they have heard of him. I believe that the demoniac has gone about preaching Jesus. The demoniac has gone about telling people what Jesus has done for him and for them. And so it is the case that when he comes and sits down, the people start to come to him in droves, the multitudes, great multitudes, the text says. And they that are lame, they that are blind, they that are dumb, that is literally, they cannot speak. And then this word maimed is used. And this is an interesting insertion into the text here, and an interesting word, because some would say that this means bent, that it is some form of a disease that has them fixed over, but just in another couple chapters, we're going to see this exact same word used. And it's in Matthew chapter 18. We're going to talk about this text today during the sermon as well, but in Matthew chapter 18, Jesus said, if your hand offend thee, cut it off, for it is better to enter into life maimed or halt than to have two hands and to be cast into hell. And so this word maimed could literally mean a digit or an appendage that is no longer there. And what would it mean for Jesus to heal the maimed person then? The arm that was gone would appear.
Miraculous.
Miraculous appearance. The leg that had been severed appears. Does Jesus have that kind of power? Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
This is trivial, but one thing, when you approach someone like that, it's human nature that their condition would be distracting to you. And if your loving wife was here, it'd be like my wife, and she would be doing something like this, and I'd say, Sherry, have you got a question? Your collar's sticking out over here.
Okay.
No, on the other side.
Other side, okay. Thank you.
There you go.
That's a true friend, you know.
Like I said, that's trivial, but isn't it human nature? If a guy's arm's like this, you almost can't talk with him. You try not to stare at it.
Right.
But what's the deal with the arm? You know?
Yeah. And it's just human nature. Sometimes it's, like I said, it's hard. We gravitate towards looking at that which is unusual. And but Jesus here, they've brought him. Go ahead.
Well, is it the same word in both? I think this is this would be written in Hebrew or Greek.
This is Greek.
Okay,
Yeah.
Greek. Okay, so is it the same word used in both contexts, 18 and just the actual same word? Because sometimes I get confused because they always translate sometimes different. So I was just curious if we're comparing apples to apples. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, NASB, which tries to match the Greek, it says, large crowds came to him, bringing with him those that were lame, crippled, blind, mute, and many others, and laid them down at his feet.
Right.
So,
Yeah. And someone who is missing limbs could definitely be
crippled.
in some way considered crippled. I'm not saying that's what the word has to mean. I'm saying that exact word in the context of Matthew 18, where Jesus said it's better to enter into life or heaven having lost an arm or an eye than it is to go to hell with all of them. That's the word that we're using here. So it could be that Jesus has taken limbs that were completely gone and made them appear.
And when you get to heaven after being maimed, your body will be transformed. So
Yeah.
that will definitely come back then. You won't be missing anything.
Right. Yeah.
So it's a kind of a good lesson that he came first and he healed the guy with the demons, right? And he knew that guy would go off and die. So at that point in time, that people of that area were not ready to receive him at all. And because they sent him away, they were scared, they were whatever, okay? They sent him away. But that guy going out and talking, prepared the people, kind of like John the Baptist did, prepared the people to be open-minded to hear. And so I think that was all, of course, all pre-planned, but it's kind of an interesting note to take on that. He didn't force himself, which then would relate to how we approach people sometimes.
Right.
Sometimes we will go in and talk to somebody, and at that point in their lives, they are not ready to hear. And we need to realize that and maybe back off a little bit, and then, but always be there ready and waiting.
Right. Do what we can to cultivate soil.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Going back a little bit, talking about Jesus cast the demon out and it went into the swine. I just wondering if he really intended for it to go into swine, but he just cast it out, and that's where it chose to go to try to.
Well, I think the demon besought him to go into the swine specifically.
Yeah.
And he granted that.
Okay.
What they weren't suspecting, I reckon, in some way, was that the swine were going to and somehow go mad and run off the cliff and be killed. The demons recognized who Jesus was and even asked him, "Thou Son of God, have you come to torment us before the time?" And so they knew that they're on borrowed time. And so I'm not so sure that what happened was exactly what they were looking for, but it's exactly what they got. And the people there, and I'm not so sure that the people that are coming to Jesus here are the exact people that rejected him the first time. This is an area of multiple cities. And they could be, they may not be. He's in this area, in this region, and we don't know. But I like the thought that this man who had been healed had gone out preaching the things that Jesus had done for him. Don't you know people knew of him? Don't you know that he was a subject of gossip and talk throughout his time of being possessed? And yet then they see him in his right mind, and he's no longer naked, and he's no longer cutting himself, and he's no longer living among the tombs, but he's preaching about this person who has healed him and has this power. And so it seems to us, as we read the text, that Jesus comes back in this area, and the multitudes are just coming to him in groves. And Jesus does what he came to do. He has come to give life and give it more abundantly. And in this context, he came to heal them. His healing them and providing for their physical needs opened their eyes and their ears to the spiritual truths that he was going to be imparting to them. And the same thing happens for us oftentimes. If we can meet the physical needs of people and we show that type of love and interest in them, oftentimes it can open the door to spiritual truths later on down the road. What's that saying? People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And it is often through the compassion that we show people that opens the door to spiritual talks.
Seems like the new commandment Jesus gave applies to this as well.
Yes. You've got to love the Lord, but you got to love your neighbor as yourself. And who is your neighbor? It's anybody that you come in contact with, right? That's the story. And what is the reaction in verse 31 of these incredible things that Jesus is doing? It says, insomuch that the multitude wondered. The multitude was astonished. The multitude was in amazement. The multitude had never seen such before. The multitude had never encountered such. There were people of this time that were con men and that were tricksters and that had sleight of hand. But nobody had ever been able to make the dumb talk and the blind see and the lame walk and heal a multitude, all kinds of diseases, leprosy, you name it. Jesus had the power over it. And when they saw him exercise his divine power, they marveled and they wondered in amazement. Can you just imagine being there and seeing that? You see this person who has maybe never taken a step in their life, and at the word or the touch of Jesus, jump to their feet. What a marvelous thing indeed. And they wondered. And it says that they glorified the God of Israel. What does that phrase hint us towards?
Jesus wasn't asking them to glorify him. He was asking them to glorify his Father.
That is one of the things. Yes, Jesus came to do his Father's will. In John chapter 6, I came not to do my own will, but the will of him that sent me. My meat is to do the Father's will and to finish his work. Everything that Jesus did was in order to point people to the Father. And as he pointed people to the Father, who was the Father pointing back to? The Father was pointing back to Jesus. But Jesus was pointing people to the Father. This is what the Father is doing. I am here at his behest. It is the Father that sent me. And we see this beautiful union between the work that they have going on. It was not a self-promotion. It was not something that Jesus did to bring himself glory and honor and to have the people wowed at him. He did things in such a way that people glorified the God of Israel. And that phrase also shows us that this is likely Gentiles predominantly. Because if it had been Jews, he would have probably just said they glorified God. But they're in a pagan place where God, the God of heaven, is not the only little g God that's around. They serve all types of little gods. But when they saw Jesus doing what he did, they glorified the God of Israel, the one true and living God.
It wasn't long ago he said that was the spirit of Rahab. It was the God of Israel that she was impressed with.
Absolutely. And she saw. As did the others. It's interesting when you talk about Rahab, and we're going to talk about her in the lesson today. It's funny how these things work out. But the children of Israel have come up to the River Jordan. They've been in a place called Gilgal. Joshua chapter 5. They circumcised the people. And they are at Gilgal, which means rolling. God literally rolled their sins away at that time. And they push across the River Jordan. What happened to the River Jordan? God pushed the waters back 30 miles to Adam. You think the people on the other side of the river saw that and thought, whoa. There's some guys dressed in funny clothes, carrying this thing on their shoulders, and as soon as their feet touched the water receded back 30 miles. That was impressive. And to Rahab, she saw that and she said, God is involved in this. Go ahead.
I think there's even modern proof that happened, that they found different things, that the water was pushed back.
Right? And there may be. The only proof that I need is that God recorded it for us, and He's trustworthy. But that sign was not enough for some people. Just like this word, it's not enough for some people. Some people, you can take them to the Word of God, and they'll deny it. They won't submit to it. Just like in this time when Joshua had taken over for Moses and they're making this press into Canaan land, and they see something as amazing as the water receding 30 miles to the city of Adam. Wasn't enough for them. They're going to hold on to what they've known. The nature of man, right? The great multitudes come to him. They have all of these things. Verse 30, there's one point that I want to make as I back up because it just caught my eyes. They cast them down at Jesus' feet, and it says, and he healed them. Now, what was the conversation between Jesus and the Syrophoenician woman of whom he healed her daughter? The conversation was, it's not fitting for the little puppies to eat the children's food before the children are fed. And she said, even the little puppies get the crumbs that fall from the master's table. And here you see these Gentile people, they're getting more than crumbs. Jesus is all out, healing them. Every which way that they need it, he is providing for them. There's more than crumbs. And he does this, and the multitude wonders. They glorify the God of Israel. And in verse 32, then Jesus called his disciples unto him and said, I have compassion. What do you think Jesus is doing with these words?
Asking them to have compassion as well.
He is explaining, number one, the motivation behind his work. He is explaining the motivation behind his actions. And isn't that consistent with what he commands for us to do in 1 Corinthians 13? If you have not love, it profits you nothing. Go ahead.
God's original plan was for the Israel nation and then to the Gentiles, the nations. But in these verses, it shows that whoever seeks Jesus, he in faith.
Yes. And that's exactly what we see. Go ahead.
So after he healed the woman's daughter, he just decided he's going to go get on a roll with all the puppies.
Yeah. He has a ministry. The ministry to Galilee ended in the last chapter. And that was his ministry to the Jews in the region of Galilee. Now, he is going to have his ministry to the Gentiles end in this chapter. And I'm going to make a point about these things before the end of class that I think is just very interesting. So I hope I don't forget. Verse 32, Jesus called his disciples and said, I have compassion on the multitude, because they continue with me now 3 days and have nothing to eat. And I will not send them away fasting, lest they faint in the way.
We've had in the national news an infamous senator that spoke for 25 hours. And I don't think Jesus was talking for 3 days. But if I can do an image that works in my mind, that scene in Gone with the Wind where the whole railroad yard is covered with wounded and maimed soldiers out there. Part of the reason they laid these people at his feet is they couldn't stand there that long waiting for their turn. I think he spent a long time healing these people.
He did.
And he had a lot of teaching to do, and he taught as he healed, but it was 3 days worth.
It was. And when we consider Jesus and his work ethic and his stamina, it was motivated out of compassion. These people needed him. He had a mission, and he was bent on accomplishing it. I must work the works of him who sent me while it is day, for the night comes when no man can work. Jesus knew that there was coming a time when his work on earth would be done. And so as we see him go through his ministry, he goes through his ministry 90 to nothing. He's working. And all of that was predicated upon compassion. And in this moment, this is compassion upon Gentiles, compassion upon not the Jews to whom he was sent. And this would have been maybe a challenge for his disciples. And he tells them, I have compassion on these people. And if you're going to be like me, if I am the rabbi and you're the disciple, which means you mold your life out after mine, and what I do, you do, and my actions and habits become your actions and habits, then if I have compassion on these people, then you must too. He says, I have compassion because they continue with me for 3 days. Now, I do not believe that we are to think that they were there 3 days without any food. But after being there 3 days, their food source has been exhausted. They don't have much food left. There was food among them because they got 7 loaves and a few fish. It was all that was left of this great multitude. And some of these people have made a great deal to get there and to be there. And Jesus says, I don't want to send them back with nothing, lest they faint in their way going home. Jesus' ministry took place in about a 70-mile radius. This is in the area of Decapolis. There's all kinds. Jesus has come from across the river, from across the sea, and the lake there. And so some of these people may have traveled 50 or 60 miles on foot. That's a journey to make without any sustenance, right? And Jesus said, I'm not going to send people back like that.
And he had just fed them on the other side in the previous chapter.
He had just, and that's going to be interesting for us to consider here. In verse 33, he says, and his disciples say unto him, whence should we have so much bread in the wilderness, as to fill so great a multitude? And we have a little question mark pop up over our head, and we think, are you kidding? Are you serious? Maybe the disciples think that what Jesus did on the other side of the river with the Jews, he's not going to replicate here with the Gentiles. I don't know what the reason. But he had already told them he had compassion on them. He already told them, I am feeling empathy and love toward them. They said, how are we going to get so much food? Verse 34, Jesus said, how many loaves do you have? And they said, 7 and a few little fishes. And he commanded them, he compelled them, he ordered them to sit down on the ground. Now, this may be indicative of a different season. This may have been several months' time has passed since he had fed the multitude on the other side, because in the last chapter, in the feeding of the 5,000, they sat down in grass. And it may be that this is in summertime and the grass is scorched and no longer there, and they are sitting on the ground. Maybe not. Just a possibility, right? He commands them to sit on the ground, and he took the 7 loaves and the fishes, and he gave thanks. This is different from the last chapter. It says he blessed, right? He gave thanks, brake them, gave to his disciples, and the disciples to the multitude. Now, some people want to fancy this as a retelling of the same event, but it's not the case. It's not the case. There are so many differences between this event and the last event. One of the differences is there's a different number being fed.
What would the same writer tell it twice?
Right. Another difference, the location. One was on the east side, one's on the west side. There's a difference in the supply of food. One was 5 loaves, one is 7 loaves, right?
Didn't Jesus himself question them, and he questioned about this time?
Yes.
This time?
Jesus talks about these 2 different
All I'm saying
events.
is he said, okay, these 2 separate times.
There's a difference in the baskets. In the baskets of food that is taken up. There is a difference of time, a period of time here. They had been with Jesus here for 3 days. And there was a different people. It was primarily Jewish in chapter 14, and this is primarily Gentile in chapter 15. There is no way possible that this is a retelling of a similar event. They're completely different. He says here, he gave thanks, gave to the disciples give to the multitude. And you made a beautiful illustration about how that was the way the gospel went out in our last chapter. Thank you for that illustration, because it's beautiful. And they did all eat, verse 37, and were filled. This Greek word is a word that is used properly for fattening cattle. He filled them up. He fattened them up. He gave them every morsel they could eat, they had access to. You see, he went from faint to filled, from famished to satisfied. And that's what Jesus is able to do. And it says here, and they did all eat and were filled, and they took up of the broken meat that was left 7 baskets full. Now, maybe there's something to do about the number 7. Maybe it's denoting something about perfection within this Gentile group that Jesus has ministered to. But the one thing I want to note about the word baskets here is it's different. It's a different word than the word baskets in chapter 14. This is a different basket. And we find this same word used for basket in Acts chapter 9 and verse 25. And if you remember in Acts chapter 9 and verse 25, Paul was let down in a basket. Same word here. Which would lead us to believe that maybe this is a basket big enough to hold a man, and they took up 7 of them. Maybe it's the case that there were more leftovers with this event than with the other. I don't know. There were more baskets with the, go ahead.
It speaks to me that Christ doesn't want to see waste, and especially wasted soul.
Sure, absolutely. But what a spectacle, what a show of and display of his glory and power. And it says, and they that did eat were 4,000 men, beside women and children. And he sent away the multitude and took ship and came into the coast of Magdala. Now, what biblical character who is prominent? Mary Magdalene was from this area of Magdala. And that's just an interesting note to tie together. And he comes unto the coast. Mark calls this Dalmanutha, and there is no problem between the two renderings. They're probably in the same area. Like I said, Decapolis is a big area of 10 cities, and just like they call, where do you live? On Blue Ridge, right? But there's different areas that we would associate within that area. And so there's no problem, but we'll pick up in chapter 16 next week, because we're going to continue seeing, we're going to see Jesus' problem in a different light. Go ahead.
There's a point you didn't want to forget.
Okay, the point I didn't want to forget. Thank you, and I do have time to make it. Jesus ends his Galilean ministry with a feast. He had the crowd sit down, and he fed the 5,000, and that was the end of his Galilean ministry. Jesus here ends his Gentile ministry with a feast. And then Jesus ended his Judean ministry with the feast, the Last Supper, the Passover meal, and then he offered himself. And so we want to be like Jesus, and we're going to end our day with a feast. Thank you so much for your attention and participation.